Hi, today our guests are two fantastic Taiwan hens. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have both of them on my show. Enjoy! Welcome to Studio Asia. Hi everyone, today we have two guests in our show. Please introduce yourselves, tell us who you are. Okay, maybe Michael first.
Hi, my name is Michael Turton. I've been involved in Taiwan and its politics since about 1990. I've written extensively on the island. I'm currently a columnist for the Taipei Times.
And
Nice
you
to meet you.
had for a very
Nice to
long
be here
time
today.
a very popular blog, right? The View from...
Yeah, I had the most popular blog on politics and culture in Taiwan in English.
Okay, and Donovan.
Yeah, I've been in Taiwan since 1988. I'm currently working on I wear a lot of different hats. I'm co-publisher at Compass Magazine. I'm one of the guys behind Taiwan Report. I'm also a columnist for Taiwan News. I'm also on ICRT News. So there's other things as well, but that'll suffice.
Thank you. Great. So we have two excellent Taiwan hens. I would like to start with the usual mainstream media Taiwan crap. Like, what is it that they usually don't get right? I might start with three descriptions that I don't like. First is Taiwan separated from China in 1949. Then there is the Taiwan independence minority. And then there is US considers Taiwan part of China. So maybe you could add what you don't like, and maybe you could describe it a little bit. Donovan.
Let's see. Okay, so how about the third one, that the US considers Taiwan part of China? The actual status in the eyes of the United States and a lot of other countries is that Taiwan's status is undetermined. So a lot of people will perk up at this point and go, oh, but what about the one China policy, which they conflate, which China does this intentionally, tries to get people to confuse the two, with China's one China principle. Now, the one China principle that China uses is that Taiwan is a part of China, period. The one China policy used by the United States is that the United States acknowledges, other countries use words like recognizes, that China's position is that Taiwan is part of China. It doesn't affirm that. It just says, we recognize you have this opinion. It would be like, if you said, oh, look at my tie, isn't it beautiful? And I say, yes, I acknowledge that you think your tie is beautiful. That's basically what the US's stance is. You'll hear people on the side of the KMT and in China will bring up things like the Potsdam Declaration and the Cairo Declaration, but those were just basically letters of intent. They were not signed. They were said, yeah, we're thinking about doing these things coming up in the future. So because they're not signed legal documents, the United States still has an undetermined status on Taiwan.
And there is even countries, I think, like Japan and Canada, they even say it less strict. They say takes note of China's position. Okay, Michael, what would you describe? What's the typical mainstream media crap we have to deal with?
Well, we had an excellent example this week with a piece from Foreign Affairs that came out last week that talked about the U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity without interviewing any Taiwanese experts on it. And this is a common pattern in the media. They'll discuss something about Taiwan and not ask anyone from Taiwan, even though not just from Taiwan, but even people based here, even foreigners who are based here were not asked. It's as if Taiwan is constantly the object of the news, the object of things that other people do. The two things that you pointed out are also very, very common. And another issue that I also noticed this week, again with BBC, which is really bad with it, is that they keep using terms that imply that China is going to reunify, reabsorb, that Taiwan was once part of China, which of course it never was. No Chinese emperor ever owned Taiwan. So which also implies that nations have a right to places they once owned, which is absurd. No one would argue that Poland should go back to Russia or Ireland should go back to England. So the thinking in the media about Taiwan is very low quality.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, Taiwan has, as Mike noted, was invaded by the Manchurian Empire, and along with the Uyghur, the Uyghur peoples, China, Tibet. So it was part of the Manchurian Empire up until 1895. And then it was, a Japanese colony. So Taiwan has been separated from China since 1895. To put that into context, Australia became a country in, 1905. So, and nobody calls Australians British.
Yeah. Okay, good. Michael, anything to add?
No.
Okay, good. So then, what do you think? How has Taiwan's international image changed, especially, let's say, since the war with between Russia and Ukraine? So, is there any change for the better, or is it does it have a bit different standing now? And what's your take on that? I think it's much better than before. So I think that is a big advantage. What do you think?
I think we've had several things happen in the last decade. The invasion was sort of, at least for Taiwan, the cherry on top of our image change. But even before that, the election of Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, and if you go all the way back to when Chen Shui-bian was president, Chen took the first steps in pushing for a more Taiwan-centered Taiwan image, not the China-centered image that it had under the KMT. But a lot of things changed, and the most important one was the China threat. Before 2000, the U.S. didn't have to worry about a threat from China, right? But as the China threat has become more powerful, I mean, China's far more powerful than it was 20 years ago, and more urgent, Taiwan has become more important to the United States. And of course, the media reflecting whatever the establishment view is, has started to shift on Taiwan. Before, they used to treat it with a kind of they used to look down on it, and now they we see a lot of tropes about plucky Taiwan, vibrant democracy, and so on and so forth. So there's been for us a positive change. We're in the news more often, and Taiwan has been cultivating its image with the boba, the milk tea, and the cute things, and all the stuff that has made Taiwan more prominent on the world stage. Donovan?
No, yeah, I wasn't sure if you're finished there. Yeah, I can add a few other things. China has actually helped us a lot. Before, if you looked at the propaganda, it was all, oh, poor us, put on upon by the world. And then they started a couple years ago this whole wolf warrior diplomacy thing, which is basically a giant middle finger to everyone. And they have been offending pretty much every capital on earth that they can. And they've also cracked down on Western journalists in China and kicked a lot of them out. And then they added the anti-sedition laws in Hong Kong. So what's happened is you're starting to see more and more media groups, just CNN just recently set up a bureau here. I believe it's 200 some odd journalists or something like that. It's a staggering number have been accredited in Taiwan. And you're seeing a lot more reports where the byline is from here. And that's a big shift, because before, what would happen is we would get covered from a Shanghai or Beijing based bureau. And so they tended to view Taiwan through a China lens. Whereas more and more, these journalists are based here, and, a lot of them are still kind of newbies. Not all of them are that great, but what's happening is that they're increasingly learning more about Taiwan, and they're getting better and better, and starting to really view the situation through more of a Taiwan lens than a China one.
To me, the major moment was actually the outbreak of the Wuhan virus, because actually Tsai handled it way better than she. Actually, she achieved all of his goals. The economy is doing well. We had no lockdowns. And yeah, she kind of did it peacefully and way better than in China. So I think this was the last change that really proved the difference between Taiwan and China.
Marriage equality is also a big one. That's
Good.
something the press frequently notes.
Yeah.
How about, what do you think? Why do Taiwanese seem so unfazed by the situation? The West talks about war and the end of the world, and Taiwanese almost don't notice everything that's going on. So what do you think? Why this attitude?
I actually wrote a piece on this right around the time when the missiles were flying overhead in early September. And the point I made is it's not that Taiwanese are exactly unfazed. People were talking about it. It was all over the news. It was constantly on the news, almost 24, well, not quite 24/7. It wasn't enough, but it was like over half the time the TV news was focused on this. And of course, K-pop stars. And Gao Jiayu singing.
And car accidents.
Yeah, but it was a topic. I mean, I went down and I got fried rice, from my magic fried rice shop, and she was talking about it, and so there's concerns, but people overseas tend to forget that this threat has been here for generations now, and on the street, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So panicking and running around freaking out really doesn't help. But people were aware of it. It was kind of a nervous cloud in the background. The analogy that I used was, if you remember when the pandemic first started breaking out around the world, and, it was something that was happening initially in faraway places, but it was like getting to countries closer and closer to you. And so there was kind of this lingering, like, this could hit here. This could really, screw up our lives. But you still went about your life. You didn't, and, until it actually hit your country, it was just a kind of a background dread. And I think that's sort of the way it was here when China was shooting missiles overhead and conducting war games off the coast. It's something that could hit. It's in the back of your mind. But a lot of the press just sort of looked at people going about their normal lives and thought the Taiwanese didn't care, which I think was inaccurate.
Michael?
Well, there's that. And I think the other issue is that the government has not pushed it very hard. And so what we don't have, which we desperately need, is a universal civil defense program. And something, so there's no, in every country, if the government does not designate something as urgent that the populace needs to be involved in, then the people don't do much. And people here know we have long working hours. And going back to the martial law era, the military has very low status in society. People don't trust it and they don't want to join it. So you have a lot of different factors that make Taiwanese appear complacent to outsiders.
Maybe we can then continue with the civil defense and readiness to fight. I think, Donovan, you wrote recently about the conscription in Taiwan. Could you maybe talk about it? Like, what do you see? What's the readiness really of Taiwanese to fight? And what do you think about the conscription problem?
Okay, so slowly over time, it used to be, depending on what branch of the military it was, that young men were conscripted for either 2 or 3 years. And then they lowered that to 1 year. And now this is actually often mistakenly blamed on Ma Ying-jeou. Now, Ma Ying-jeou deserves a lot of blame because he brought the military spending down under 2%. And so on and so forth. I could go on a long rant about that, but it was actually agreed on and then implemented. It was agreed on during the Chen administration and then actually implemented in the Ma administration to bring down conscription to 4 months, with the idea that it was going to go to eventually to an all volunteer army. But the problem is, as Mike pointed out, is that they have trouble recruiting people into the army, and we've got a massively falling birth rate. So the big debate now is to bring conscription back up to 10 months to a year.
Yes.
And there's also been a lot of discussions on improving the quality of the actual conscription process. Mike can speak more knowledgeably on this. His son went through that not too long ago. But the thing is, the military has said that they're discussing all of this now, and they'll make an announcement at the end of the year. Now, there's several, and then it wouldn't actually go into effect until another year after that. Some of the issues that they do need to discuss and determine are true. For example, do they have the capacity to take in all of these people for that much longer? The living quarters, the ammunition for them to train with, and those sorts of things. Also, another thing up for debate is, should women be included? Now, it looks like women won't be included if they move back up to 10 months or a year, at least not initially, because they'd have to build all these extra dorms or extra capacity to accommodate them. But they may look at it in a little bit of a longer term time frame.
And so, Michael, about your son or about the young people, is there any readiness to fight? Are they eager, or they just say, "Oh no, that's not us"?
I think the young are really willing to fight. I don't think the military is able to supply them with the skills they need. And my son speaks very disparagingly of his 4 months experience. But the thing about the whole discussion of conscription here is that it's a substitute for a real substantive response to the Chinese invasion threat. And so, let's just raise conscription is okay, we've done something. Now we can just go on with our lives again. But of course, it's the least inconvenient way of doing it, because what they would need to do if they were really serious is set up a civil defense program that taught people all the skills they needed, from gardening to nursing to pulling people from wrecked buildings. They would have to be, they finally are now. They're putting money into drone programs and missile programs. But they would have to be spending a lot more money. The putting a lot of boys into conscription really will not make much difference to Taiwan's defense, but it will make people feel like the government is doing something. And that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Both Mike and I have written articles not that long ago. I wrote a long piece that we do need a civil defense movement that doesn't just include teaching people how to shoot. And as Mike talks about, it's the other thing, pulling people from burning buildings and that sort of thing. And I actually just came out with a piece on a missed opportunity by the DPP.
Yes, I read it. Yes.
Oh, you read it. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. But for your listeners, basically, the DPP has been campaigning on, I'm loosely translating it here, resist China and defend Taiwan. But the problem is that all they're really doing is it's just a slogan. And this is a local election. And the thing is, this gave them an opportunity which would have played really well into the strengths of their party, and added a significant and important debate point to the conversation during this election that would have really favored the DPP. And that is if their candidates came out with concrete plans on how to prepare for war. And this is, keep in mind that, city governments, and sometimes this, comes into campaigns, for example, preparing for flooding here in Taichung, preparing to mobilize for typhoons. These are things that the governments do on a regular basis, but they don't do this for a potential invasion. And I think that they need to think about things like hardening certain types of infrastructure. And something that Mike can talk more knowledgeably about than me, because I learned this from him, is, for example, if you look at the air raid shelters, they're a disaster. And Mike actually went out and did some research on this, so I learned that from him. But there's so many different things that the DPP candidates could have put forward that would be relevant in a local election, and if they won and implemented, could actually really help prepare the country for a war. Because you've seen in Ukraine, local governments really matter when it comes to mobilization and dealing with the effects of an invasion.
Okay, Michael, do you have anything to add?
What he said.
Okay. Okay, then I have two topics left. One is, do you think there would be soon after, Chinese cities like Hong Kong, soon a quiet exodus? People, maybe the rich people or foreigners, mixed couples leaving Taiwan within the next year or two?
No, I don't see that happening. I've got very wide contacts, as does Donovan. I'm not hearing anyone saying, "Oh, I'm going to leave next year. I'm going to leave now because of this." Quite the opposite. People are talking about coming here to invest into, whatever. But Taiwan's an attractive place at the moment, especially with China locking up and people leaving China.
Okay, Donovan?
Yeah, my experience is the same as Mike's.
Wow. Okay. I actually thought there would be something going on, because I'm really surprised people are not scared after the last party congress. I think it looks pretty bad.
Well, I would agree, but we all got lives. I get up in the morning, I go to work. So does Donovan. We have to live, and leaving, for a lot of people, they don't have the money to leave. There are people who are in their mid-career, say they have kids who are 7 and 8, and one partner has to have a visa. A lot of us are married to Taiwanese. A lot of people are married to Taiwanese here.
Yes.
And for them to get a visa takes a year now in many, many countries.
Okay.
Immigration is broken all over the world.
Okay, the last topic is, what do you think should Taiwan improve? Like, what most people complain here about is low salaries, maybe immigration programs for foreigners. What do you think? Where's room for improvement for Taiwan?
Boy, that's a topic I read on frequently. The immigration issue is a big one.
Yes.
Treatment of migrant workers. All these things are bound up, because in Taiwan, the idea of citizenship is blood related. So there's a caste system for foreigners. If you're a foreigner who happens to be of Chinese extraction, then you're at the top of the list. And if you're a brown-skinned foreigner from someplace like Philippines or Indonesia, you're way down there. You are never immigrating here. And the ironic part is that Taiwan's own experts have now concluded that what they need to do is encourage immigration from Southeast Asia. But everything else is bound up with Taiwan's medieval immigration policy. And you can't have long-term sustained economic growth with a shrinking population. We're aging rapidly. Taiwan doesn't get a lot of news about this the way Japan does, but we're aging just as badly as Japan. As you noted earlier, we're suffering from very low birth rates. So the only way that we could get more humans is to import them. And it's another thing, like the Chinese invasion thing, that the government will frequently speak without actually making any concrete changes. We foreigners have been talking about the visa issues here for 30 years, the whole time I've been here. It takes months. It can take 2 months to open a business here, as I think you know. Whereas in Singapore, the US, to register a business takes a day. And that's the way. If you want to set up even a nonprofit, it's because of these relic laws from the one-party state era. Things like even setting up a nonprofit is extremely difficult. So I think Taiwan is facing some very serious long-term problems that all revolve around it. It's an unwillingness to change its immigration rules.
Donovan?
Yeah, you'll notice I paused when you asked that question to let Mike jump in first. He writes some of the best material on these kinds of issues. Frankly, writes the best of anyone on these subjects. I can add one thing about the immigration rules. The way that it works is they have improved significantly in the last 30 years. It used to be that getting a visa was all but impossible and you just worked illegally. That was the way, it worked then.
Yeah.
And then they introduce, what they'll do is they'll introduce a reform, but limit it in such a way that only tiny numbers of people can can take advantage of it. Like when they, at first brought in the alien resident certificate, it was open to tiny numbers of people, but now a lot of people can get them. Then they opened up permanent residency.
Yes.
And it was extremely difficult to get. And now it's, it's much easier. I wouldn't say it's super easy, but it's, you stick around for 5 years and have a decent salary, you'll be able to get it. And then they recently opened up the possibility of being a citizen and keep your citizenship from your original country. But right now, the number of people can get that is limited to, I think only 200 and some odd people have qualified so far. And like half of them are, 80-year-old priests, who've done some, charity work for the country, which of course is really not going to be helping with the birth rate. So yeah, essentially what they do is they move in these baby steps, and when what they really need to do, and this is what the point that Mike was making, is that they really need to move a lot faster on this, considering the birth rate, the rate that it's declining, and it's a staggering rate. They need more foreigners here, and they need more foreigners here breeding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yeah, no, I'm listening.
Well, I think there's a lot of issues that are the environment. There's the educational system. The country is facing everything: electricity prices, water prices. All of these things are hitting at the same time, and everything has to change. And there's almost zero will for that. In a way, democracy has made things more difficult to change, because now everything has to be passed by the voters. In the 70s, when people were pumping out groundwater like crazy in Taipei, the authoritarian government just said, stop pumping. And so they did. And so Taipei is no longer sinking into the earth. But now, in Yunnan, the same thing has happened. Yeah, Kaohsiung is exactly. Because you can't tell people to stop pumping or you won't get their votes. So there's all these major issues that are happening at the same time, from the China threat, immigration, natural resources, pollution, and the government is moving very slowly. And
the banks are still stuck in the 1990s.
Yeah, let's not talk about the banks. I'll start drinking.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. It was really a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Thank you for watching the show. Please leave a like or a comment. If you didn't like it, share it.